shrank from the mountaintop. Behold the gift of power pop.
Hey, this is Aaron at Popaholic, and today I am talking with musician extraordinaire Anton Barbeau, who has a brand new album out called, ironically, Power Pop. And in this album, which I have reviewed, it goes in a lot of different directions, but it really focuses a lot on, at least two songs focus on power pop, the term and the culture behind it, I believe. And Anton, tell me a little bit about how this project got started, how you started with this.
Well, this one, excuse me, this one is my pandemic album. Apparently, we all have to have a pandemic album. So this was, this was me here on the farm in lockdown. I've always made records on my own, or and with people, but it's not new for me to record on my own or overdubbing everything. So this is one of those kinds of records. Lots of me, or having people email their contributions from wherever. And I think it's funny, because of the pandemic, everything's a little bit blurry. When was this? When was that? And so I don't have a really clear recollection of how this particular record started, as much as just, wait, am I making another record? Of course I'm making another record. It's just what I do. Yeah. And at some point, I'd made a record a couple of years ago called Man Bird, and it was an autobiographical thing. And
yes.
Very heavily themed record. And I think following that, whatever I've done musically, I've wished for some sort of concept, something to glue it together, because the Man Bird project, it was easy because all the answers were there. I knew what I was going to write. So with this one, Power Pop, I had some image at some point, this fantasy where ABBA, meets David Bowie, and they start listening to krautrock and take lots of drugs, and Bowie joins the band and is producer and blah, blah, blah. And that was going to be this record called Power Pop. And I was going to make that record. And I'm pretty sure I came up short, It was an amusing idea for about 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. No, that's fine. I mean, I think when it comes to this album, I think you really hit it. The beginning part of the album really hits well. And then it just delves in, gets into weirdness towards the end, as usual with a lot of your stuff. Yeah. I have to say, I'm impressed with the amount of work you've been doing over the past 4 years. I mean, 2020, I think you had like 2 albums come out. Everything since Kenny versus Thrust, I think you've just been on a tear, pulling out all sorts of great stuff. And stuff. And I have to talk a little bit before we get into the details of Power Pop, of The Joys We Live For, which was last year. I thought it was an amazing album. It had one of my favorite songs, Cowbell Camembert. I love that song.
Yeah, thank you.
I can listen to it on a loop. That's a cool song. And then it gets into other things, but it pretty much stays in its element, in its emotional element. Like the emotional ties that are in that album just resonated with me a lot. It seems like you approach each album not so much as I would say a concept like Man Bird was, but as a collection of thoughts that somehow lead on a path. Would you agree with that?
It really depends album by album, because sometimes, like The Joys We Live For was sort of the post Man Bird, what am I doing now, and kind of record. And I think there were 4 different little concept things going. There was a record that I wanted to make called Christian Wife, about this domestic couple in a small conservative American town, and they each have this sort of weird secret life. And it seemed like a great, I can take this somewhere. And I think I managed to get like 2 songs out of it before it kind of, just fell apart or drifted from my head. Cowbell Camembert that you mentioned, that was the one official pandemic song from that album. But so just saying, and that was going to be for a record called The Falco Years. So I had all these different images for a possible next record, and instead that record came together out of 3 or 4 or 5 different,
Different
projects.
projects.
And somehow it really ended up fitting together nicely. It's like, that's one of those things where that sometimes the record makes itself, or the record determines where it's going to end up. And sometimes I, like with Manbird, for example, I had a strong image from the very beginning. With Power Pop, I think I had that image. I was joking about this ABBA and David Bowie and krautrock and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And like I said, it just didn't really last. It's just kind of exhausting to even think about that. And so instead it just becomes, well, I'm making another album. I'm always doing all kinds of music. And so, every morning I record some sort of little synthy instrumental. So I've got loads of these things, and I've got all these songs and blah, 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 blah.
I like the organic process and the way you sort of let the album sort of come together organically. Let's get back to the album Power Pop itself. I thought the song, the sound really was something where it you're trying to get into a definition of what is the genre of power pop, and you start mentioning the Byrds, the Beatles, XTC, that kind of thing. So it does go there. And then it sort of goes into its own sort of left field. And I wanted to ask you about the later half of the albums, like Rain, Rain, and some of the other tracks towards the end. It starts to resemble an 80s movie soundtrack. I felt like saying, geez, am I watching, Last Action Hero or something like that? Or, or one of those 80s movies that basically you decided to just riff on and just talk over and stuff like that. It has that kind of feel. Was that sort of spontaneous on your part, or was that sort of planned out?
Not planned out. Nothing on this record was very planned out. Though Rain, Rain, Whisper in the Wind, and Valerie's Waiting are called the Teen Suite, and those are songs that are actually from the 80s. I wrote those when I was a teenager. Yeah. So, and I think I released the original 4-track versions of those songs some years ago on a collection called Antronica 2, which was a collection of both some of my 80s 4-track stuff and then modern, synth pop stuff that I do. And I started off as a synth guy, and I just
right. And going back to, you did Waterbugs and Beatles.
That was a 90s record, 95, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because that's when I first really became aware of you with that album. But you've been pretty consistent and, building up your sound and your experimentation along the way, which I think is great, because I do see growth through that whole process. And it's great that as an artist, you can grow that way. But I know that I was introduced to you basically. I saw your first album was advertised on Not Lame catalog, and Bruce Brodeen basically introduced me to your music. And I said, what is your relationship to the genre of power pop?
How much time have we got here?
The abbreviated version.
Right. I'm pretty sure that I'm very much an outsider, even though I'm the weird cousin who has to be invited to the wedding, because I'm family. But it's funny that there's also a record coming out the same day as Power Pop, which is released on March 25th. The Omnivore is reissuing a record I made with Scott Miller called
What If It Works.
What If It Works, right?
Yes.
And one of the bonus tracks on the reissue is a song called Little Daisy, and that is me doing your classic power pop. And this was later than Waterbugs and Beatles era, but it was somewhere back early, maybe around 2000, I think. That song Little Daisy, it's 2 guitars, bass and drums, and it even mentions Big Star. So I there are times when I am happy to kind of kiss the genre on the cheeks,
Right.
Because my favorite song is I Want to Hold Your Hand, period. My favorite anything is probably I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Oh, all right.
But my next favorite is Strawberry Fields or A Day in the Life or something like that. You know what I mean? But I Want to Hold Your Hands is just this pure moment of the thing that we love about pop music. And so when it's undefined in a way, it's just greatness incarnate. You know, I'm a fan of that. But when I think with the power pop genre, the way that it feels that there's such a commitment to the definition and keeping that definition tight. And if you sort of stray, then is it, we're not sure. And for me, the experience of music is always about, you know, what else is there? What else? And trying to find that. And I mean, I'm a fan of the idea of genre, right? You know, because
Right.
I'm thinking of when I became new wave.
Right.
13 years old, and suddenly I get this whole new wave thing, and there's music coming from everywhere. The radio station that I listened to, KDVS, at that time was playing Fela Kuti and David Lindley and Gang of Four and the Ramones, and so this broad swath of music from everywhere, but it was all new wave to me. And then I saw King Crimson on television on that show Fridays, I think it was. Yeah. And they looked new wave. So I figured they were a new wave band. I didn't know until years later that they were a prog band, you know, right? And Kraftwerk, they're new wave. And then years later, when I get into krautrock, I realized, oh, Kraftwerk are krautrock. And it's all, you know, just playing with this idea of what is genre versus what is music, or what do you like? I mean, it helps to identify things. I mean,
Sure.
we have three cats.
I love the fact that, that power pop really is an amorphous blob, and you know it goes in a lot of different directions. The minute somebody tries to define it, it's one thing, it never is, and you get into a nice big Facebook argument with people that goes nowhere. It's like a dog chasing its tail a little bit with that. And but I love that answer. Thank you. I also like some of the left turns that you take on this album, like Hillbilly Village. Where did that come from?
That came from about half a mile from where I'm sitting. I've moved back I lived in Berlin for 10 years. And before that, I was in the UK for 5 years or more. And I'm now living on a farm in a fairly small town, you know, in Northern California, with my wife and her family farm. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. But like I said, it's a small town, and there's sort of a culture shock for me. Mm-hmm. Being here, and especially having to be in a car, you know, in order to leave the farm, I've got to get in the car, even if I just want to go get coffee. So that was me coming home from coffee and driving past all these people who don't seem to know how to use their turn signals and, you know, grumble. And I'm all jacked up on coffee, and I'm just saying,
it sounds like a jacked up on coffee song, which I love.
Jacked up on coffee and pissed off at the idiots in front of me on the road, and that's all there was to it. And you know, it's such a short song, and it took me not much longer to come home and record it than it did to sing it in the car. So
awesome. And tell me also, since we're talking about some of the songs here, Julian Cope, is that a true story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was on his 2011 and 2012 UK tours. Doing a couple dates on each tour, and he's my hero. He's just he's the equivalent to me. He's like a little bit of a Picasso. If you remember, you compare him to Picasso in his very early days did like perfect straight art before he went to abstract. And I think Julian Cope started with the St. Julian album, did his like perfect pop thing before he went abstract. As long as you know how to do the basics right and you go abstract, you're going to be respected. It's not like somebody who doesn't know anything and just tries to pick up a guitar and just flail away. There is a method to his madness sometimes, which is sometimes just madness.
Yeah. Sometimes it is just madness, especially towards the 90s albums, after Peggy's suicide and, going crazy with that other stuff. But I like that song as well. And also The Drugs is a pretty amusing song to me. It just sort of like, I'm surprised you didn't even, pump it up a notch and get even crazier with it. But I love that song as well. Tell me a little bit about, there was another like 80s themed song, Running on the Edge of the Knife. How did that one come about? Because that one really sounds like came from an action film.
Right, right. And that one, unlike the Teen Suite, which I mentioned before, those were actually songs of mine from the 80s. This one was just me playing around and doing 80s just for the fun of it. There was not much to it. It wasn't, I didn't sit down to write a song, in all capital letters or anything like that. It was just,
Right.
kind of messing around with the synths and probably improvising a vocal or something like that. It's not a very thought out piece, but it just had a thing to it that I liked. And the Power Pop record, maybe you can imagine, but there are probably about 3 other records worth of material that surround Power Pop, because I record so many different things. And so it's the ones that really kind of hang in there. And I found that one charming and kind of weird, especially because it then drifts into more of a hillbilly village kind of afterthought.
Right. And I got to tell you, every album that you have that I've listened to in the past 4 years, you always have what I would call one song that just socks you in the face, that really, sticks in your head, and you'll be whistling it and singing it on your way home. And that's like, for me, it was Never Crying Wolf Boy. And I like the way you and it's similar to Cowbell Camembert. It's almost like you have this method of, writing lyrics where the words sound like they go together, even if they don't. But how do you put together your lyrics when you're building a song like, Never Crying Wolf Boy or Cowbell Camembert? Is there do you go through a thesaurus or something?
I have a rhyming dictionary. I do have
Oh,
have
you
that.
do? Okay.
But, I'm trying to remember between those 2 songs, Never Crying Wolf Boy, I know that one was originally Ever Crying Wolf Boy. So the idea that he's always complaining or always wanting attention or always going, but boy, look at me,
Right.
and I kind of wrote myself into too many lyrical corners. I just couldn't figure out what's the point of this song. And sometimes I'm more literal with my lyrics. Sometimes I'm trying to create a narrative. Sometimes I'm trying to create the image of a narrative, just the feeling that there's a story. It doesn't have to be full of details or exact. Sometimes you just want to kind of create something that feels like it's moving from here to there, and you're following it somehow. And so when I finally switched it to Never Crying Wolf Boy, obviously that changes the tone, the meaning. So suddenly he is this character who kind of, I got it. I don't need anybody's help. I can do this. I'm going to forge my path no matter what, blah, blah, blah. And and maybe there's a bit of hubris to it, but at least that gave me an easier way to push the song forward. And again, I don't know that it's not based on true life events necessarily or anything. It just feels like it has a trajectory. It
Well,
moves.
it definitely sticks, is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
that's something that's common in a lot of music. You're always going to have at least 1 or 2 songs on an album of Anton that basically sticks with you, and that was one of them that stuck with me. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you a little bit about what if it works with Scott Miller. And I read in the liner notes you guys were good friends, and actually you hung around a lot with each other together. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, yeah.
All right. I mean, like, because when did you start recording What If It Works? It was after it was after Loud Family was finished, from what I understand.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't remember when the Loud Family wrapped up exactly, but we were doing that record. I think we either started in 2004 or 2005, and I don't think it was a really long process. I was already starting to drift over to England, so I wasn't always around. But I think we made it fairly concisely, so it could have been 2005 and released in 2006, something like that.
Well, there's a lot of bonus tracks there. I mean, on this album as well, a lot of demos as well, which I thought were pretty cool. I didn't give this album a thorough listening to, but do you have a kind of a favorite of Scott's that you like, or that you developed for this album? A favorite song, or a song that basically encapsulates your state of mind when working with him?
Well, I don't have anything like that.
Okay.
But in terms of a favorite song from the record, I really like his song About Rocks Off, because that was kind of the early one that when he sent the first batch of songs, that was the one I thought, oh, that's Scott. I get to be on a record with this song, and I just love that. There's something just, I don't know, quintessential about it, that like the Scott sound. I mean, anything he did had a powerful, distinct sound, but that one made me feel like, okay, that's the kind of the warm place.
Warm fuzzies, basically, right?
Yeah. And so that was the one. I mean, I think there was the original bonus tracks on that record include, I never get his title right. Is "Don't Bother Me While I'm Living Forever," I think is the
Yes,
proper title.
First bonus track.
And that one was made under, I think he felt pressure to generate more music, more material, more minutes. And I get that he was frustrated by that, because he had a family and a kind of a heavy job.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like he could just whip these things out. But then it turns out he could, because he just kind of whipped the song out. And it's a really,
when you got that kind of talent, you can do it, even if you pressure.
Yeah.
Brian Wilson could tell you that.
Yeah, that's just a great song that Scott kind of came up with at the last minute.
So let me sort of finish off here. Who is some of your biggest musical influences? I know you have a lot, but I want to go beyond like the basic power pop stuff, like like the Beatles and Beach Boys, Birds, that kind of thing.
Although I do want to say that I wouldn't call the Beatles basic power pop stuff, because they're the Beatles. They're everything, right?
Yeah, they're influence of all rock and roll, not just one genre, for sure.
Yeah, and they are an influence every minute for me, so a lifestyle choice.
So who else? And you can get obscure here.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a song called Julian Cope on the new record. He's a big deal to me. And I'm just looking around my room, looking at posters. I've got Kate Bush there in front of me, and there's Joan Armatrading up there. Listen to David Bowie a whole lot. I mean, I'm kind of a magpie. I'm always wanting to hear things that I don't know, or dig deeper into the stuff I know. But I recently got into Elvis a little bit. I've never, we all know Elvis, but I was never a huge fan.
Oh wow! So always rediscover the classics, so to speak.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
great.
I got his, the 1969 Memphis stuff, and been listening to that.
I was just in Nashville the other week, and I saw Elvis's, gold Cadillac in the Country Music Hall of Fame, and he has a whole section in there, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, Elvis, and then Buddy Holly. What else? I actually wrote things down because I'm looking around the house. What are we listening to lately? Kevin Ayers, Yoko Ono, Hot Chocolate. Last night, watching Funkadelic, live in '77 in Houston or something like that. So all kinds of things. Just
cool. Oh well, I wanted to thank you for the time. Anton Barbeau, get the album Power Pop. It'll have some favorites for you, as well as for me. I had some favorites on it. Check it out. And as I'm going out there, walking out the door here, tell me, is there anything next? You're really prolific. Do you have enough stuff for another album in another 6 months or something like that?
I'm actually working on that right now. Although,
all right.
I have to lose my if I can reset.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. If you didn't know it, he does not have a beard and mustache. Anton is clean shaven.
There we go.
We fooled you all the whole time.
Not entirely clean shaven, but I'm working on another batch of stuff. The working title right now is A Lifetime of Faith, which I think is probably a good follow-up to Power Pop, because it's sort of, what is faith? What is belief, and how much can you get away with in that regard? Anyway, but it's so far this record, the next one I'm working on is kind of guitar heavy, which is fun. It's got a bit of rock to it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Anton, for being part of the show here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good night.
Ciao.